I think. 6:29. Who's going to take? I guess it is live. Good evening, folks. We're going to go ahead and get started, if everyone could take their seats. Thank you all for attending tonight's community forum to discuss the findings of the Trotting Park Baseball Field Site Investigation Report. Before we get started, I want to thank our outstanding partners, FCTV. They're going to be video recording and streaming this live tonight. I also want to acknowledge that we're offering tonight's forum via Zoom, and for the folks that are attending via Zoom, want to encourage them to submit their questions using the Zoom chat box. Rest assured we will read those questions and provide answers, again, for those folks that are attending via Zoom. The Town of Falmouth engaged with the firm Arcadis, which, as you've probably read, is a licensed site professional, or LSP, on December 10th, 2024, which led to the commissioning of the site investigation report after unsuitable fill material with glass and metal debris was found in the fields during a recent light installation project. The fields, as we now know, were built atop a former town dump site that operated until May of 1957, so 68 years ago. From the moment this issue was discovered, the Town of Falmouth prioritized the public health and safety of its residents and visitors, necessitating the closure of the fields to public access earlier this year, in January. I am, however, pleased to inform you, and I know there's some folks here from the Falmouth Youth Baseball, that there will be youth baseball in Falmouth this summer, just at other locations in town. And we'll be able to discuss and provide some more details on that later on in the forum. The Town of Falmouth has been and will continue to be committed to being transparent and forthcoming with all the information every step of the way as we undertake the cleanup process and work toward an eventual reopening of the Trotting Park baseball fields. And that's why we're all here tonight, to provide you a comprehensive update and, most importantly, to allow ample time for your questions to be asked and then answered. Before we start, I would like to address a major concern that has justifiably been atop many of your minds, whether there is a potential risk to the town water supply at Long Pond. I can tell you that groundwater from the fields flows away from Long Pond, and I can also share some additional good news, that recent tests of both the treated and untreated raw water at Long Pond indicated that lead, arsenic, and PCEs are non-detectable in the pond. I'll let the experts in attendance elaborate further on the science and testing methodologies that were used in the investigation report. Please join me in welcoming our guests to tonight's forum. First off, I want to introduce, and he's going to be the first presenter, Mr. James Luker, a licensed site professional from Arcadis, the environmental consulting firm, engaged by the town to conduct the site investigation, and also Janet Keating-Connolly, also with Arcadis, who conducted the health risk assessment. I also want to acknowledge two folks from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. First, Mr. John Handrahan, Deputy Regional Director. He's with the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup. And also Nav Brololowski, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. Nav is also with the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup. And her title is Branch Manager of Site Cleanup, I believe. I also want to introduce our DPW Director, Peter McConarty, and Town Council Maura O'Keefe is in the audience tonight. I also would be remiss if I didn't recognize a couple of our Select Board members. Select Board Member Doug Brown and Select Board Member Bob Muscali are in the audience. I see that we have a couple of folks, 3 folks, I believe, from the FinCom Finance Committee and the Chair of the CPC. So thank you for joining us this evening. We've allowed about an hour for questions following the presentations, so we'd ask you that you please hold your questions until after the presentations are complete. We'll have a queue up here at the microphone. We'll answer all the questions for the folks that are in the room tonight, and then we'll go to the folks that have submitted questions via the Zoom chat. And with that, I'll introduce Mr. Jim Luker. Jim.
Good evening. Thanks for coming out. I know it's a pretty rainy night out there, so appreciate people showing up. I'm a project manager and licensed site professional and professional geologist at Arcadis. And as Mike was saying, we got involved with this project back in December. So I'm going to just give you a quick overview of what we've done. So it was definitely a priority with the town to determine what was going on with the fields and if the fields had any health risks. So first thing we did, we came in and we looked at this stockpiled soil that had been taken out from the lighting foundations. When they opened it up and we looked at the pile, we could see that there was debris and glass and different materials in it that looked similar to what you might find in a municipal landfill. So we suspected that was true and did a little bit of research and found some evidence that there was in fact potentially a landfill in that area. So first thing we did, we characterized the soil pile, did a battery of tests to have that properly disposed of. Then we also were directed to do a investigation of the near surface soils on the baseball fields. There's 3 fields there, and we did near surface soil borings on all 3 fields and collected samples and analyzed them for potential contaminants of concern. The other thing we did at the same time back in January is that we did a full phase 1 environmental site assessment, an ASTM phase 1, to try to get information on the history and use of the landfill and any documentation we could find in the paper record. With the initial data, we took the initial data and gave it to our risk assessment group, which Janet Conley is the head of, and did a risk screening using the criteria that's available in the Mass DEP regulations, the Massachusetts Contingency Plan. The other thing we did to try to figure out exactly where the landfill might be and the depth and what might be contained in it was we had a geophysical study done of the area where the landfill was thought to be. Then in March, we went back out. We put in 6 additional monitoring wells to get groundwater samples to see what kind of impact might be in the groundwater. During this process, we have had conferences with Mass DEP to discuss what we were finding and the approach that we were taking to investigate this and look at possible ways to mitigate. So the first thing that we were able to find out was we were pretty fortunate that we were able to really pin down a lot of the history of the landfill. A lot of these older municipal landfills that were closed back in the 60s or 50s, there's not a lot of record on exactly what happened and when it was closed, but with the help of the town, records in the Historical Society, and looking at newspapers, we were able to find that this particular landfill was actually closed in May 1957. So there's a legal posted article in the Enterprise that indicated that. So based on the other research that we did, it appears that the landfill was taking household trash and burning it, and that the landfill was closed in 1957, and then it was partially covered over and used for other purposes. Anecdotally, we heard that somebody was growing some pumpkins or something out there on the surface. In the late 70s, the town looked at the landfill and with the support of local businesses decided to cover the landfill more completely and construct a baseball field. So there are 3 fields out there. Field 1 was built in 1977 to 1978. Field 2 was 85 to 91. And Field 3, which is the practice field, was the latest field that was constructed in 2010 to 2014. So we used these multiple lines of evidence that we had to try to delineate where the landfill was. The aerial photographs from the 1950s, several of those were very diagnostic. You could see the actual excavation area in where the landfill was operated. The geophysical study supported what we were seeing in the aerial photos, and we got good information from the geophysical study. The 26 borings and 6 monitoring wells also helped us delineate the approximate area of the landfill. So what we were able to determine was that there was landfill material under all 3 fields, and there's a natural turf covering, and then there's anywhere from 6 to 8 inches of fill material, and then you get into what appears to be some of the landfill material. And we were very careful when we took our near-surface soil samples to try to delineate how much topsoil was there by hand taking most of the topsoil samples so we could really get an idea on the depth. We did see some evidence of glass and debris that had come to the surface, particularly in the pathways between Field 1 and 2. When we opened up the material, the unsuitable material that had been taken out of the light foundations, we found a lot of glass and metal, ash, but not much in the way of garbage or any type of material that wasn't decomposed. So it appears to be most of the material is pretty inert as far as having any trash in it. Okay, this is a drawing where we've come up with a preliminary estimate of where we believe the landfill is. If you can see that yellow line, that's the approximate outline of the landfill. Now, this is Field 1 right here at the top. Get this thing to work. Right, that's Field 1, that's Field 2, that's Field 3. So the landfill material is underneath all 3 of those fields and extends into the parking lot. So the first thing we did with the soil data that we collected from the near surface is that we ran a risk screening to determine what the health and environmental risk might be using the MCP guidance. We had tested for a variety of contaminants. The primary contaminant out there that was driving the risk assessment was lead. So in Field 1, we measured lead concentration that would be considered an imminent hazard for a short-term risk for a young child, 1 to 2 years old, using the field over a 1-year period. So we didn't find the concentrations in the topsoil to be that high in Fields 2 and 3, but there is landfill material at higher concentrations beneath the sod and 6 inches of topsoil. So our recommendation at that point was to stop the use of Field 1, and when that information came out, the town closed the fields to further activities. We did not find any imminent hazards in terms of the environment. And Janet Conley is here tonight if you have specific questions on the risk assessment or any of the data that we use to calculate that. This is just a picture of the pathway between field 1 and 2. And as you can see, there's this, due to erosion and possibly frost heave, pieces of brick and glass have come to the surface. For the most part, the natural turf on the fields has covered everything, and you don't see this, but in this area where there was some erosion, and you can see that field 1, the topsoil is definitely the thinnest. This has worked its way to the surface. The other picture is just a picture of a typical soil boring. So you can see on the left the black material, and then one to the right you can see there's just glass and brick associated in the fill material. So it's fairly easy to determine when you're in the landfill material, even with the soil borings. Even though you only get a small amount of material, there's quite a bit of debris in there so that you can characterize it as containing some landfill material. We look at the sensitivity of the area, and Mike was talking about Long Pond. You can see Long Pond is located to the northwest of the site. The site is in an area, this is the Mass DEP 21E site assessment map. It's in an area of medium to high yield aquifer. So the most stringent standards for groundwater apply in terms of reporting and cleanup. So we were using the RCGW1 for groundwater and the S1, RCS1 standards for soil. This is a groundwater contour map. This is from the April data. Our initial map that we posted that's on the website had an error in it. So we went back and found that error and used the April data to recalculate the groundwater flow more correctly. And we're looking at the other data to see if we can use that data also. But as you can see in this, the blue arrow points the direction of groundwater flow, which is to the southeast, which is in the opposite direction of Long Pond, which is to the northeast. And that's what you'd expect, as groundwater generally mimics topography. So there is that topographic high at the entrance of the park, you know, where the groundwater was actually quite deep in that well, as deep as 30 feet. And then when you move down to where there was an apparent wetland to the southeast, groundwater gets as shallow as 9 feet. So that's the pattern that the groundwater is moving that way. And you can see the wells that we put around, the 6 wells, we put wells up gradient on the edge of the landfill on both sides, and then 2 wells in the down gradient side. So just to summarize the results that we got for the soil and groundwater analysis. So these are the compounds that we detected in the soil. They included these metals: antimony, arsenic, lead, thallium, lead being the primary concentration, the highest one. And then we picked up some, those are PAHs, the naphthalene, the 2-methylnaphthalene, related to some type of petroleum product or burn product, the benzoate also. We did pick up one concentration of PCBs, but very low levels. For the most part, we didn't see any PCBs. For the monitoring wells, we sampled for the similar contaminants, and for the most part, we didn't detect anything in any of the wells above the most stringent standards, except for an MW2, monitoring well 2. And in MW2, we detected tetrachloroethylene, which is sometimes referred to as PCE, and that concentration was 27 parts per billion, and that is over the standard of 5 parts per billion. So just to yes. And so well number 2, just so you know where that one is this well here. So we didn't detect anything in these 2 wells, which are down gradient, or this well that's up gradient, but we just had it in this one well. And we went back and resampled it just to make sure that the result that we had was valid, and we picked up a concentration again of 20 parts per billion. So it does appear that there is some PCE in that area. So kind of summarize where we are with the preliminary investigation. We've moved pretty quickly on this information because of the interest in the site and the town's mandate that they want to try to find a solution and get the fields back up and running. But we've come up with these conclusions so far. You know, we definitely know when the landfill was operated. We know it was closed in 1957. We have a fairly good idea where all the landfill material is. There is some variation in the concentrations because they graded it over, and so they mixed it around. So it's hard to know where the exact edge is, but we've been able to have a pretty good idea of where the landfill material is based on the different lines of evidence that we went through earlier. We do have reportable concentrations established by the Mass DEP under the Mass Contingency Plan. That requires the site to be reported to DEP, and it has to be addressed and cleaned up under the MCP. And we have done that, and that it's been assigned a release tracking number, which that's the number there. So we have a release tracking number, and now we'll be going forward under the MCP, doing the additional reporting and cleanup that's required. The closest water supply is the Long Pond. That's the inlet for that pond is about 2,500 feet away. As Mike mentioned in his opening statements, that pond is tested routinely. They haven't found any contaminants of concern in that pond, and the groundwater flow, based on the data we have so far, appears to be going in the opposite direction. We checked with the town and looked at their records, and there are no drinking water wells on record within 500 feet of the site. And so our preliminary conclusion is the groundwater flow is towards the southeast away from Long Pond. So what's next? Okay, so we're going to do more investigation. We have planned to do a number of borings and additional monitoring wells. Some of them are to determine where the finer points of the landfill are, particularly in the parking lot area. We want to make sure we understand exactly where that ends and stops and starts. We also want to put in some monitoring wells and do some more soil testing to determine what's going on with that one PCE concentration in the monitoring well 2. We'll also, some of the borings are for geotechnical purposes. The town has engaged a design engineer to look at ways to reconstruct a baseball field, and they're going to need some geotechnical borings to help with that plan. So we will be doing additional groundwater sampling. We're going to be doing quarterly groundwater sampling for the next year. We're going to be working with the design team on remedial options when they go through and start looking at what's available and do different cost analysis. And we'll be doing reporting as required under the MCP and doing more risk characterization based on the additional data that we collect. So conceptually, we're looking at different ways to reconstruct the fields and make them usable. This situation where the old landfills like this get covered over and used by municipalities is not unique. I was involved with one in Wellesley about 10 years ago. They had a similar problem. I think there's been some, I think in Plymouth, another one that was done. So the concept is that you want to prevent any exposure to the contaminants to anybody using the field. And so the way you can do that is to put some kind of a physical barrier over the area of the landfill so that there's no contact with the underlying material. So different ways you can do that. You can put down a geotechnical barrier and put 2 feet of clean cover on it and then put on your grass turf. And then you put on what they call an activity and use limitation. And that activity and use limitation alerts anyone that comes and does work at the fields or does any subsurface work, understands that when you get down below that geotextile barrier, there are contaminants in the soil that need to be managed properly with proper protection. Another way to do it is very similar, is you can do the geotextile fabric over the top of the existing field, and then you can put a foot of cover over it and put a synthetic field on top of it. And the synthetic field is a very sturdy barrier. So in the past, it's been acceptable, and we've discussed this with DEP, to put a little bit less cover on when you have a synthetic field. And that would also require a AUL. So those are the conceptual ideas for reconstructing the fields and making them usable. And that is the basic set of data that we have to date and our plans for going forward.
Thank you, Jim. So I'm going to invite Peter McConarty, our Director of Department of Public Works, up. Peter's going to talk a few moments with regards to site reconstruction, some of the work he's been doing, working with Arcadis and with Gale Architects. Peter?
Excuse me. Peter McConarty, Director of Public Works. I have more of a narrative form that I'll be going through. I just wanted to put one slide up on the wall that just shows a generic aerial photo of the fields that identifies field number 1, field number 2, and field number 3 that's existing out there right now. So in Mr. Luca's presentation, he took you through the history of the project, what processes have been taken up to this point, and the steps that are coming up next. I'll be giving you an overview of the full project, including the project team, what can be expected during the project design, the bidding and construction phase, the field components, and what is being considered at an anticipated timeline. So we're looking, and we have mentioned this before, we are looking to build a state-of-the-art facility, and we're considering a wide range of options. With that said, every project has a comparable cost associated with it, and the town has an abundance of competing needs at the time. The options that I'll be discussing describes what will be reviewed by the project team as we go through the design process, and they will be evaluated to determine the need and what benefits it will bring to the athletic facility. We want to slice the state-of-the-art facility right down the middle. We don't want to go over the top, but we also want a facility that meets the needs of the town, a facility that the town can be proud of, and a facility that will bring a positive experience to the players and families of Falmouth Little League. So in 2025, the Little League baseball season, currently right now, the existing complex is closed. In March, the town retrofitted 3 ball fields to temporarily replace the closed Trotting Park fields. Park Superintendent Jeremiah Pearson worked with the Little League coaches to move the Little League games to the alternate locations. The Parks Division performed renovations and upgrades to the Lawrence School Field, the Morse Pond School Field, and the high school JV field. The league will play at these alternate sites until the Trotting Park Field complex is complete. For the project team, on the town side, it'll be the Public Works Engineering Division. All consultant correspondence, plans, specifications, bidding documents will be managed through the Engineering Division and overseen by Town Engineer Jim McLaughlin. As the project moves through the concept, design, and final documentation phase, the Engineering Division will coordinate the funding requirements, the flow of the meetings, the presentation material, project deadlines, and ensure construction oversight by the consultant. On the environmental side, you just met the project manager, James Luker from Arcadis. The remediation portion of this project will be designed, permitted, and overseen by Jim as the licensed site professional. James has been the contact person for Arcadis, and he will continue in this role until the project is complete. For the athletic facilities consultant, we have brought on board Gale Associates. The town retained Gale Associates for the design, permitting, and construction and oversight of the athletic field facility and facility renovation portion of the project. Gale will also design the improvements to the facility, the grounds, the parking areas, etc. With the above outline of the project team and the expected complexities of the work, there will be full coordination between Arcadis and Gale Associates. All subsurface design and construction will be reviewed and will be approved by Arcadis during the design phase. For the proposed fields, so the design we will look at including the replacement of all 3 fields. The field orientation will remain the same. Field 1, Field 2 will be game fields, and Field 3 will be more of a practice field. The reasoning for making Field 3 a practice field will become more evident as I move forward with my presentation. So the options under Field 1 is a full restoration, Field 2 is a full restoration, Field 3 is a full restoration as a practice field. So what is a field restoration? Mr. Luca had already mentioned it and gone through it. So Arcadis has developed 2 response action options that can be considered. And they consider option A is placing geotextile membrane over the landfill material and adding 2 feet of clean cover on top, followed by natural grass. Option B is placing a geotextile membrane over the landfill material and adding 1 foot of cover on top, followed by a synthetic turf cover. There's also a hybrid option that can be a blend of the above and can be designed to maximize the lifespan and versatility of the fields. As Jim said, all options would require an activity use and limitation plan. The use and limitation plan will require that all future subsurface work will require a soil management plan. So for the fields, we're looking at synthetic turf. If we go with the synthetic turf, it'll include under drains and the drainage so the fields will drain properly. And if we go with natural grass sod, it'll include irrigation. We're looking at replacing the existing dugouts that are on the field. So the new dugouts will consist of new slab dugouts for all 3 fields, and they'll have game shade roof shade structure coverings over the slab. For the backstops, all 3 fields have backstops. Field number 1, it's completed. That's a tension netting system. Field number 2 will also include a tension netting system, and field number 3 will be a chain link fence backstop. For spectator seating, terrace seating, and retaining walls, we want to optimize the site. Due to the multiple options and configurations that the site offers, this will be discussed further during the concept phase, but the options include bleachers, stands, terraced areas, and the alike. So we will be working through that. We want to maximize the area between the parking lot areas and the fields. So for fencing, there'll be replacing the new outfield fencing, replacing the new sideline fencing, new dugout fencing. There is some good news. Under the lighting, upon further review and site reviews and site inspections with the consultants, the existing Musco lighting system The lights will be able to remain without removing the light columns or any major modification to the pole bases. There will be additional field lighting that will be designed for field number 2. And for field number 3, it's overhead lighting and field lighting is not an option due to the high-tension voltage power lines that are overhead. It's too close in nature, and we will not be able to put field lighting on field number 3. Press boxes. There's a press box at field number 1, field number 2. That's an option that will be discussed for replacing those during the concept design. ADA accessibility improvements. There will be ADA improvements incorporated into the plans. The improvements will be commensurate with the requirements that are the needs of the facility. Parking lot improvements, Jim had mentioned. The 3 parking lots along the western edge of fields number 1 and fields number 2. All 3 parking lots are currently at varying elevations and are constructed of asphalt and gravel. As was shown on Mr. Luca's presentation slides, the old landfill is located beneath portions of the 3 parking lots. During the remediation, the project team will design an acceptable solution that will include the parking lots into the facility design and allow more accessibility for the fields. The 3 parking lots will receive asphalt pavement and vehicle striping. The cost. Depending on the options that are agreed upon, the cost is going to fluctuate. We've mentioned a lot of different options. I can state that we'll be going back to town meeting for additional funding to rebuild the fields and facilities. We expect to come back to town meeting in the fall or in the latest in the next spring. For the timetable, Jim had mentioned it earlier, we have moved fast. We've done a lot of work since this started back in December, and we want to continue to move fast. We have the design team together now. We're going to be looking at putting the concepts and design working together. So all parties included with the project will be working expeditiously to perform all the necessary and required testing and sampling, and drafting up a remediation plan that is satisfactory to Mass DEP in the town. Our goal is to complete the construction on this project and have the fields open in a timely manner. Depending on the design decisions, the funding availability and the construction scheduling, and obviously the weather during the cold weather season, we anticipate having the fields open for the fall season of 2027. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Peter. So we're going to move into our question and answer period. As was indicated, the PowerPoint slide deck that was presented, as well as Peter's slide, we'll have that posted on the town's website tomorrow. We'll try to get that posted tomorrow. So what I'd like to do, I'll kind of act as a mediator. And I know we want to allow the bulk of the time that we have remaining, all of the time that we have remaining, to allow you to ask questions. So if you have questions, if you want to queue up at the microphone to my left, we'll go ahead and start that. I think that we have a few questions that have been submitted from folks attending via Zoom. So what I'd like to do is address the questions from the folks in the audience tonight first. So anyone have any questions? Who's going to lead it off? To use a baseball analogy.
Hi, Peter. Doug Brown, Select Board. I know it's early and you might not have had a chance to really put numbers together, but any indication yet if the synthetic turf with the 1 foot of soil, the cost comparison to the natural turf with the 2 feet, which one do you think might be more expensive?
So I can say at this time, looking at it conceptually, that there's not a big difference between the 2 of them when you put both facilities together. When you do the natural turf, we have to look at the 2 feet of material, the extra foot, and we're going to be looking at irrigation. When you look at the synthetic turf, you have the 1 foot, and it does not have irrigation, but it has the drainage underneath. At this time, there's not a big difference comparatively with them. And like I said, you can use an option to do synthetic turf infields and natural turf, natural sod outfields is an option that might be able to take place.
Bob Miscali, also from the Select Board, and thank you, Mr. Luker, for your presentation. Could you just explain what the standard would be, or when you say repeated contact for that one-year-old child, what would be repeated contact? Every day, a couple of times?
Can you take that, John?
Or Janet?
Hi.
Hi.
Good evening. Thanks for your question. So are you asking how frequently we
Yeah,
assumed?
what would meet repeated contact that would be a concern for harm to a child?
So the assumption that's built into the DEP tool that we use to come up with that is 3 times a week for 30 weeks over a year. So that is the rate that we assumed.
All right, thank you. Get out of the way.
Hi, Abigail Noble, Precinct 2. I had a question about the potential of artificial turf. I know it was brought up at the fall town meeting. I'm an environmental chemist and science policy expert, and I was curious whether or not the plans for investigating the options for turf will take PFAS into account or forever chemicals, and whether or not the current sort of legislative landscape will be considered. Personally, I didn't get a chance to comment at the town meeting, but I've spent many years doing environmental consulting, and I have published papers on PFAS in consumer products and have expertise in that, working for California EPA. There are several states who have already banned artificial turf, a couple of towns in Massachusetts, and I know that there is currently a bill that has been introduced in February this year to consider putting a 36-month emergency moratorium on installation of artificial turf in order to investigate the human health and environmental risks of PFAS. And so I just, I know that there are a lot of different ways to approach looking at artificial turf, but because PFAS is used as part of the extrusion process to make the plastic grass blades, it's so far been very difficult, if not impossible, to create artificial turf without PFAS. And so I just wanted to ask if that is being considered or will be considered, or to ask that I hope that might be considered during that process. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. I know this past town meeting, there were some concerns, and there was a discussion about the synthetic turf. At this point in time, we're just looking at all the options. We want to see what's out there for all the options. I personally have some interest in it, not for the concerns that you had mentioned, but just how it would work on the field and over the old the waste facility. So we have questions also ourselves, but at this time we want to look at all the options.
So, thank you, Peter. So from my perspective as part of the project team, to answer your question directly, we will consider those factors. We will. I'm no expert. I'm standing here before you tonight saying that, but we will consider those factors as part of the analysis. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I'm very gratified that the town is considering natural grass. I'd like to just read a quick. My question tonight is, can we learn? I'm a Precinct 5 representative, and at the last town meeting, I was disheartened by the slim majority vote to support covering Trotting Park fields with plastic grass and its known toxic effects, and replacing natural grass and its environmental benefits. I wondered how many had actually read the fact sheet that was handed out listing known risks from plastic grass, cancer, and heart disease that only show up after the harm's already been done. Recently, Arcadis Environmental reports that Trotting Park fields are contaminated by lead, arsenic, deadly remains of a dump covered over to create the field, and further show groundwater is also contaminated by toxic chemicals. Now, will we knowingly consign our kids to play on toxic plastic grass or natural grass, to create our own love canal years from now, or choose not to repeat past mistakes. Falmouth has chosen to ban plastic bags, nips, single-use bottles, and many plastics used in our local businesses, and rightly so. We've learned about forever chemicals and the inescapable nanoplastic particles that are now in our air, water, soil, from plastics in our everyday products, which we can't avoid. And now, shockingly, we find those particles in our bloodstreams and vital organs, like our lungs. Tonight, we really need serious, careful considerations to either ignore facts and let our kids pay the price, or choose to protect them, even if they get muddy or miss some games due to the real world we live in. Can we learn and protect them? I hope so. Their future depends on us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rich Rogers, I just want to say thank you to Peter and everyone at the DPW and the FYB guys for getting the fields ready for the kids this year so they didn't miss a season. Couple questions though. Why not start new somewhere else?
Why not start new somewhere else?
Yes.
So staff did analyze several options, town-owned parcel options. They weren't cost-effective, and they certainly weren't going to speed up the process of getting the fields in play any sooner.
Do you have these reports for people, or are they just in the air somewhere?
So I think there's an article written in the Enterprise that talked about a couple of the sites that were evaluated. We can certainly post some of the information of the sites that we looked at.
Can you post that on the...
We did evaluate some sites, to answer your question.
Can you post that on the John Neal page?
We sure can.
All right. And another question. So new lights went up on Field 1, 2023. Why was there no testing then?
Testing of what?
The soil.
So the first indication that there were any unsuitable soils came when we were removing some of the spoils from those light stanchions. Prior to that, we had no indication that there were any issues.
Putting the lights in, you didn't think it was a good idea to, you knew it was an old dump, you didn't think it was a good idea to test the soil?
We tested the soils when we brought Arcadis online. That's what I can tell you.
All right, and it said today that things were found in September, right? It was brought to the attention that it was toxic in September, right?
The term toxic was not used. Some non-compliant soils were discovered.
It was in September, right?
No,
So, no. It said it in the paper today.
I'm trying to answer. I'm trying to be responsive to your questions.
I know, but I'm just telling you, it was in the paper, and that's what you guys said. They were found in September, right?
It wasn't until we brought Arcadis, the LSP, on board as part of the team to do the analysis that we were told, the levels of lead and arsenic initially.
But you knew there was potential for it in September, right?
We knew there were metals and glass in the soils.
Okay, so then...
But we had no idea that they exceeded any kind of MCL.
So then you let fall ball happen, right? You let the kids go and play there and didn't say anything or didn't do anything?
Again, we were not aware of any
You just said you knew of it in
soils
September.
exceeding any state standards until Arcadis was brought online.
You just said you knew of it in September with the glass and everything, but you just let fall ball and families go there? Yes or no?
We had no indication that there was an issue, sir. I don't have another way of saying that.
You knew it could be contaminated.
We knew that there were some work done to excavate the light post, and there's some metals.
All right, you're running around in circles. Yes or no? You knew in September that it could be contaminated. Yes or no?
I'm not going to debate and argue with you here tonight, sir. We're here to talk about what we're doing going forward. That's what we're here to talk about.
All right, then, can you... Yes, and coaches and everyone that's put in time here, coaches that drag the field in the dust, they're sitting in a dust
We
hole.
had no indication in September that there was any
It said it in your report and said it in the paper today.
Okay, well, I don't know. I didn't read the paper today. I didn't see what the report said today. I can tell you that when we brought Arcadis online, the results of their test, scientific analysis, that's when we first were aware that there was any kind of
But you knew there was glass and things coming to the surface in September,
state standards.
right? You knew it was coming to the surface in September, right? And I have a whole list of dates you gave me that you said you were going to close things and they were the wrong dates, and I can hand them over, do whatever I'd like.
What I can offer is that, so a typical construction site, when a contractor starts, and they start doing excavations to install light poles, install electric, or what they do, they stockpile material. So the material came out of the ground, and the contractor indicated that that looked dirty soil and that the soil was not structurally stable to hold the light poles when they put the light bases in. So we say stockpile the material, the contractor stockpiles the material. There's multiple stockpiles on the site during construction. The construction went on, the project went on, and the project was getting finished up for fall ball. The town was looking for change orders from the contractor to bring to, number one was to extend the fence from a 4-foot fence to a 6-foot fence. The second was, I think, was putting an osprey nest on the top of a pole. And the third one was to remove that soil from the site. And that was in September, somewhere in the September timeframe. And the contractor said, if you want me to remove that soil from the site, it needs to be tested. So town engineer and myself started working back and forth with,
Yes.
started working with the engineer of record, and the engineer of record, we were going back and forth with the engineer of record, and then that's when we ended up making the contact with Mr. Luker, and we had initial meetings with Mr. Luker in mid-November after we got our dates together, and then the proposal was signed in December 10th, somewhere around that, and they were out testing the 19th and 20th of December. During that time frame, while we were waiting to have the meeting with the town and Arcadis, we were collecting information, we were collecting the history of the site. Arcadis was out looking at the site, determining where they were going to do test pits and evaluation of the soils. That's what we knew. We didn't know that we had anything reportable in that material until it was tested, and the results came back in early, I think it was January 8th, somewhere in that time frame. And we met within a day of that, and then that's when the town met and said, close the fields, and that's where we are from
So
there.
we just left a pile of contaminated soil there for kids to play on?
The material was covered. We did not know it was contaminated until the reportable tests were done and the results came back, and we knew that we had a problem.
Okay. So, all right, so September, we had a feeling that the field was contaminated.
I would like to
and we
allow
let
some
them
other
play fall.
questions, sir.
All
I think
right.
we've answered your
All
question.
right, I got some more here, so don't worry.
Okay.
We got dates and everything.
Okay. Any other questions?
To restate one of his points, you didn't know what was in it, but you don't know until you look. And so you have to be curious when you're building on a landfill. You have to exercise an abundance of caution, but be that as it may, that's in the past. I would like to thank the town for getting on this when it did. A lot of towns might not do that, but so that's good. My primary concern is the groundwater, and it has been mentioned here, and I'm heartened to see that there will be further testing. So the characterization of the flow of the groundwater is done by Arcadis, or was this a previous study done by another? The contours and the direction of
was
flow
done by Arcadis.
were done by
performed
Arcadis.
Yes. The information that was presented tonight is the result of Arcadis.
Right, but it seems, I would encourage you to do a more detailed study. Just in general, I think it would be good to know the behavior of the groundwater around Long Pond. This seems like a cursory and a good first step, but I think it is a first step.
And I believe, and Jim, you can speak to that a little bit. There's some additional testing planned. Can you address that?
Hello.
Hi.
So we put in 6 wells, and we measured the groundwater elevation in those 6 wells. And those wells are tied to the USGS datum. And so
They're tied to it. They reference it, or?
yeah, so it's like, it's tied to this.
So, for example, do we know the thickness of the lens? Do we know
We don't
a
have.
3D picture of how that's distributed?
Well, we know something about Long Pond. We know the elevation of Long Pond is around 12. We know the elevation at the landfill is around 7. So we know that Long Pond's kind of a flow-through pond, so the groundwater is generally going that way in a regional basis. So we do know that, and so we have pretty good information, and we know the topography, and the groundwater follows the topography. But what we're going to do is we're going to keep measuring the groundwater and see where it changes seasonally, and keep track of what's going on in Long Pond. But right now, everything seems to point that the groundwater is flowing away from it. In addition to testing the wells, we also tested the irrigation well that's at the soccer field, which is even further down gradient, and that also didn't contain contaminants.
So I'm not a groundwater expert, but there must be a way of determining the thickness of the lens of water. And
Yeah, you could put in deeper wells to figure that out, and we are going to put in some more wells, and we may go a little bit deeper to figure out.
I'd like to encourage the town to put additional resources to cover the cost of a detailed study of the groundwater, because it's extremely important. What you have here is a chemical mystery. You've gone from putting light poles in to finding glass and metal, to doing boreholes and finding quite an exotic array of metals in certain places, in hot spots, I would call it. And the 1,600 ppm of lead in one hot spot would to me say, let's look a little more carefully at this and see if this is a maximum. Is this a medium of even higher hot spots? Is it a one-off thing? It really is a mystery. And then there are the things like antimony, arsenic. I think thallium was found in one boring. Mm-hmm. In your experience, what would be the source materials in a garbage dump for things of that nature?
Well, the garbage dump takes in all kinds of household trash, and then they incinerate it, so it has a tendency to build up metals. Metals don't volatilize, so that they become concentrated in the ash. And of course, the lead is the most common metal that you're going to see in that kind of material. So lead's very common.
Well, zinc was pretty common.
Zinc, yeah.
I mean, zinc was huge, and it's a regulated metal. I mean, it is very common. But what I'm trying to get to is you have a geological mystery here, and I think you need to go very carefully about unraveling that mystery. And I'm not sure how you came up with it's not a grid of boreholes. It's sort of, was that based on the ground penetrating?
Yeah, we put wells up gradient to the sides and down gradient at the landfill.
So I read that part of the report and it said it would show metals. Did that mean ferrous metals or lead, like lead batteries, or what?
Yeah,
all of that?
Large pieces of metals.
But what kind of metal? I mean,
car parts, things like that they could pick it up. So that's those types of things. Barrels, those types of things.
Yeah, it would be nice to, I mean, finding antimony, the only thing I could find on antimony is that it's part of car batteries. It's in the dividers that divide the cells in car batteries, and maybe it's a hint that there's a bunch of, I mean, it was an unrestricted dump. It wasn't just household waste. I don't think there were people checking people in and out. I think anything could be in there. And the other concerning thing, the TCEs, the volatile organics, fortunately they weren't found everywhere. And I think there was a PCB detection in one of the.
Yeah, there was, very low level.
That's very concerning. That means, what's the word I'm searching for? Transformers possibly buried there, things like that.
Yeah, could be, but that
really, I think the town has done a fantastic job for an initial look. But I think it should be treated as an initial look. And consultation with the state EPA should be a high priority, and I hope to see more detailed analysis in the future. Not to get nitpicky, but the ground sampling went from 0 to 0.5, and then 0.5 to 5 feet. So my take on that is that 0.5 to 5 feet, where most of the high metal concentrations were found, would be a lot of dirt that was mixed and then subsampled, right? And I would hope in further reports that you say how much dirt was sampled, what the size of the subsample, and for goodness sake, when you say not detected, put the detection limit that you didn't detect. That's very informative, and I'll stop there.
Thank you.
How are you, folks? Paul Gonzalez. I'm president of local league. First off, I'd like to thank everybody from the town. I mean, it was an extraordinary effort to get our kids to play baseball this year. It was no small task. I mean, I can't thank you enough. You know, we're out and playing. I guess my question would be, when you're doing your cost analysis, are they doing with synthetic versus grass? Are they going to weigh in, like, what do we run during the year, fertilizer program that we run and all that stuff over the next 10 years versus the cost of synthetic too?
Yes.
I mean, we have some overview costs there, right?
Yes, we will take, that'll be calculated part of the analysis. The maintenance ongoing, you know, I've personally in other communities been involved with synthetic surface fields, and they last, what, 12 to 15 years, and then you got to look to replace, if they're maintained according to the manufacturer's specs properly, you get 12 to 15 years, and you got to replace them. So we'll take into account all of those different factors, maintenance costs, the equipment that's required to maintain them properly in the analysis.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
At some point, there was some information that...
Can you bring that microphone down a little bit so the folks in the room can hear you? Maybe not that far.
That time. That the distance from a domestic well was at least more than 500 feet?
I believe that's correct. Jim,
Okay,
can you
is
speak
that
to
kind of the standard for, do you really know that 500 feet is a long enough distance?
Well, that's the search that we've done to date, that we just wanted to make sure there were no wells within 500 feet of the site boundary. So that is a guidance number in the MCP. So,
I see.
but we haven't really, we're continuing to research that, but we haven't really found any evidence of private wells up in that area. But the way we do that is we go through with the town and get the records and make sure that all of those addresses are hooked up on water and are paying the water bill. And there's no record that they've actually had any kind of a well or well log associated with that property. So we've done that with the private wells and also with irrigation wells. They're trying to find out that not all the irrigation wells unfortunately come into the database, but definitely want to make sure we know that there's no private wells. But we don't have any evidence right now that impacted groundwater above drinking water standards is leaving the area.
Okay, well, my well, I believe, is quite a lot farther away than 500 feet, but I'm still concerned about, I need to find out about the groundwater flow and...
Can you supply your address and we'll look it up for you?
Yeah, I'd kind of like to see a map with the groundwater flow indicated with my property, so maybe...
Yeah, we will take a look at that. I don't know, do you know how far you are from the baseball field?
No, not really.
Which direction? Do you know which direction you are?
I can't really tell you that.
Well, we'll look
better
at
if I
it.
look at a
We'll
map.
set up a time to meet with you, ma'am, and we'll take a look at the map. And
Yeah, absolutely.
get this.
Okay, the other thing is when the comparison between natural turf and artificial turf, we hear that the artificial turf is cheaper, and I can't help thinking we're being treated to the high cost of low prices, because how do we really estimate future health effects from the chemicals in the artificial turf and the environmental damage, where, you know, the dump that is having to be cleaned up now, 50 years ago, where somebody had said that, or far longer ago than 50 years ago, somebody said that that wasn't the right place to put a dump, and it wasn't the right place to put baseball fields. Somebody would have said, well, another alternative would have been too expensive. Well, we're paying for it now, and are we going to have the same thing to face 30, 40, 50 years from now from the artificial turf? And I think we should also consider the cost to the environment of the displacement of plants and animals, and the heat that's created, which would be, with a grass field, you have the cooling and the oxygen production, and those are costs, plus the disposal and recycling of artificial turf. It gets pulled up in one place and put down somewhere else. So why are they pulling it up in the first place? Because it's worn out? I mean, this doesn't make any sense to me. So.
Thank you for the questions. And again, in the interest of being transparent, we're letting the community know we're looking at synthetic as an option. We've not landed on that. We're going to consider all options that are available. And we hear the concerns of the community.
Sorry, Abigail Noble, Precinct 2. I just wanted to add one bit comment that I think touches on both of the previous two comments, which hopefully is something in the direction of solutions. I wanted to ask a question whether the Toxics Use Reduction Institute, which is a Massachusetts state government agency, they have done an alternatives assessment to compare organically managed turf, conventional turf, and synthetic turf, and they found that organically managed natural grass is both safer and more cost-effective over the lifetime of those fields than artificial turf. I've also looked on their website, and they do have community grants to municipalities to address toxic chemicals associated with their strategic priorities list. So that might be an option that could be looked into if there was additional community concern that might, go beyond what the town might be able to do. So
Thank you for providing that. We will research that. Thank you. Mr. Rogers.
Question about, so I love the DPW guys, the parks guys, but sometimes there's accidents, say they're mowing the lawn and they hit a pole or something and the pole needs to be replaced. They have to get a certified person to come in and replace it, right? They can't just replace a pole because it's a
Looking forward when we do this remediation of the fields.
Yes.
Rich, can you clarify?
So say, I'm not saying there's ever an accident with the guys, but say they're on the mower and they hit a pole and it breaks. Back in the past, FYB volunteers would place the pole and, volunteers would do it. But now it's a certified contamination spot. Who's going to be able to dig down and put a new pole in?
Yeah, that question has been brought up at one of the last public meetings. There's going to need to be some future conversations on that. In the past, there was an MOU. I think the direction that we're going in now with these fields, it'll be a town responsibility.
So would the person have to be certified to dig down?
If you're penetrating if you're going to be penetrating into the solid waste area, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as long as it doesn't go past the barrier, anyone can...
That would be more of a question for Jim. The way I look at it with an AUL, we've had AULs on other properties in town with underground oil tanks or what have you. Basically, the way we look at it as Public Works is we do any excavation, any digging, we would need the soil management plan, and we would have to be consulting with.
Now,
so we'd be saying that the Falmouth Little League would not be replacing a fence post or a pole or...
Yeah, so say if there's a pole knocked down, does the season have to come to a stop because it's exposed and they have to redo it, or? Because that's more cost, and now the kids aren't playing
I think
anyways.
Yeah, I think that's going to be taken on an as basis, an as situation basis, but we know that fence posts go down 3 feet. So when we're installing the fence posts, we know that we're going to have enough so the posts are not below the, so if we have to fix a post, if we bend a post and have to fix a post, I don't want to be calling Jim every time. If there's a possibility, we want to make it so we can replace the post. But basically, anything the way we look at it as Public Works is anything underground, it's going to be a licensed site with an activity use limitation on it.
And so, say if the pole's down, the kids can still play, even though there's a hole in the ground, and it's exposed. You know,
Yeah.
I'm just saying. Say you got to replace a pole, and
I know.
I just want to make sure, like, if something happens, that the season doesn't come to an end. You know,
Yeah,
I want to
so
make sure the kids can continue to play there.
I see it as case situation.
Okay.
If something happens on the field, if there's a chance for us to rope it off while we're talking with Arcadis, or be able to work around that.
Yeah.
That's something as case, but there will be an activity use on it.
Yeah.
So I see Public Works taking more of a role in maintaining those fields.
Okay. Thank you.
While I got you at the podium, there was one other thing.
Can you step to the microphone, sir? If you could go to the microphone so everybody can hear. Thank you.
The newspaper part of the report, going back years, mentioned dumps in North Falmouth and West Falmouth too, old dumps.
I believe there's multiple old dumps that have been in Falmouth.
Any plans to look at these?
The ones that we know of, that obviously we have the big one on Thomas Landers with the solar panels on. We have this one that we have. Yeah, the ones that we know of that we can, when we did this project, getting ready for this project, we had to work with Mr. Luke, and we had to do a historical, get all the aerial maps from back to the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and trying to trace that back, and the wood line, trying to zero in on sites, it can be difficult, but if we know of an area of it, then it's something we would check.
Well, there was something in those newspaper reports about North and West Falmouth, I think, so.
Yeah, thank you.
Couple more questions from the audience in person, and I know there's 2 or 3 questions from folks online. So yes, ma'am.
Hi, good evening. I'm looking to understand a little bit more about the health risk of those exposed. I haven't seen or heard a lot of advice to parents on what they should or should not have to consider or do regarding their young child's exposure. I heard 3 times a week, over 30 weeks in a year. I think that's about 90 hours in a year. What about 300 hours over 5 years, for example? Is that not a risk if that was your exposure amount? I'm using that example just because I calculated my son's exposure over 5 years. Should we be getting our kids lead tested? I mean, I know they get that at their annual physicals and stuff, but there hasn't really been a lot of advice on if we need to or not need to worry or take some type of action based on exposure.
That's an important question. Not something I can actually answer because I'm not a doctor. And so that is absolutely a question for your pediatrician. Children are required to be lead tested in Massachusetts, so that's in place and that's helpful, and they can advise you when you get those results. But I do want to talk a little bit about what we did do and what its limitations are. So when you do this health risk assessment under the MCP, it's a very specific protocol. But the objective is to find out, what should we do about the soil? What should we do about the groundwater? So with respect to protecting public health and the environment. So it's a tool that we use to figure out what do we do next. But what it isn't, it is not a medical assessment. It's not a reconnaissance. It's not a health study. So I'm not trying to delay you, but I can't actually tell you that. But what I can add a little commentary on is, we make these assumptions about, you had asked about the rate. So if it's 3 times a week, and it's not an hour, it's actually, the assumption is that you get your entire exposure of soil. I don't know if everyone knows this, we all eat a little bit of soil every day. So unintentionally. But that entire amount of soil that you might get in a day, we're assuming that all happens at the ball field. But of course, it's happening at the swing set or somewhere else in town or sitting on the grass in front of the library. So there's a daily amount of soil you might take in. We're assuming all of that's happening at the ball field, which is probably not true. And the numbers that we use are numbers that DEP has identified. So they said, these are the numbers we want you to use to evaluate this so that we can understand this site versus another site versus another site. Again, it's a tool to prioritize and rank things of concern. So I hope that gives you a little bit more sense of, we're building in margins, or DEP is building in margins of safety. We don't want children exposed to lead. That's just absolutely true. I think we can all agree with that. But I can't say, 20 times is too much for this child, or 300 times is too much for any one child. We're just trying to say, this is the limit. Let's have a margin of safety so that we're not even close to the limit, and we're getting down to a place where, and really what we're doing is we're not worrying so much about the numbers. We're just saying, let's not have people touch the soil, rather than saying, I think it's okay to be there X amount of times. The idea is we're just cutting off the exposure pathway, and then we can't manage the uncertainties of knowing who might be affected by having more exposure than somebody else.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful, I understand. And then the fact that, this might not be a question for you, but you did say, the parent should take it upon themselves to speak to their pediatrician, do their own research. So should I take that to mean the town doesn't have any responsibility towards helping parents through that, or understand that the take is that it's, again, their responsibility to research and understand this and decide on their direction?
Yes, because we are not medical doctors, and it's an important question. The recommendation that we've been making, and we're going to continue to make, is encouraging parents that are concerned to seek advice from their primary care physician.
I haven't seen that recommendation yet, but okay, cool. Thank you.
One more question from the audience here, if there's any.
My name's Rich Bradley, Precinct 7. You said that Peter did, I think, about the looking at other sites. Was the too cost prohibitive or what?
It was, and we will post the results of that, the sites that we looked at, and I think there was an article in the Enterprise a month or two ago that talked about a couple of those sites. I think one of them was Thomas B. Landers Road. Do you want to talk about those a little bit, Peter? You might be able to give more specifics in terms of the site development costs and the topography.
Yeah, I think we were talking about 4 separate sites. One of the sites was the site on Thomas Landers Road. It was a wooded site, to be able to go in there and clear the site and open it up. One of the concerns that I had in particular is Thomas Landers Road is a very busy roadway. We got 2 concrete plants that are right there, and those trucks are traveling at good rates of speed Monday through Saturday. So for me, pulling in and out of that site was a concern for me. I mean, those trucks, you're not going to stop one of those trucks from 300 feet away. So that was one of the concerns for me. One of the other sites was the compost facility. Compost facility, I think, is like 99 acres, but it's relative proximity to some of the neighborhoods up there. It would be another area that would be doing a lot of tree cutting. So we looked at that and said that probably would not be a good site. There was some other considerations, but that probably would not be a good site. And then we looked at the Augusta parcel that's over by next to Falmouth Lumber off of Brick Hill Road. And we also looked at a possibility of up at Carrot Shop Road. Those sites right now, they're town-owned, they're public use, and right now they're being held for the possibility if the town does not get our outfall that we're going for, we're going to need them for the open beds, for the discharge, for the wastewater. So that, until we find out, which is probably the end of 27 to 28, kind of put those sites off the list. And we started looking at this current site, and we said, all right, so we have a current site that's already there, that they're already being played on. There's already neighborhoods around it. There's already sports lighting. People know that they're there, and people are not complaining right now. If we go into the neighborhoods and want to build new ball fields with 70-foot tall lighting stanchions, it'll be a whole new public going out to the public, and there's always going to be some NIMBYs not in my backyard. That's a factor you got to consider. But those are the 4 sites that I know that we looked at. We definitely looked at. There might have been a couple of more. But
And then you limited, I think it was Field 3, as a practice field for lighting?
the reason we limited Field 3, because of the light, because of the sports lighting. It can be played. We're looking, Field 3, I believe, I believe all 3 fields have scoreboards. All 3 fields have dugouts. All 3 fields have the backstops. It can be used as a official play field. It's just going to be limited because it's not going to have lighting. But it can be used. It's just we can't put 70-foot tall lighting. I think the wires are 135 kV, and they're, I think, at 110 or 120 feet up. They're not that much higher than the lights. So through Eversource, we cannot put lighting there. They'll be set up as official play, but we're going to be looking at it as more of a practice.
Because my thinking is that practice field should have lighting on it, because it's going to be higher use.
Yeah.
And just the site is such a contaminated site that
Right.
other places should be looked at, I think. It's got to be cheaper, and someone said that the artificial turf is cheaper. It's 3 times as much. Artificial turf is way more.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make this comment, okay, about the artificial turf and the natural turf. It's been customarily, they did the high school field, was it 2020? We did some other, typically, these decisions come back to town meeting. This will be the same. We need to come back to town meeting to get some additional funding. So it's not going to be town engineer and myself in a back room with the consultant saying, hey, we're going to do this, and just put the plans out there. There's going to be some openness to it, and there's going to be some transparency to that. It's not that, it's not a given. It's just, as a town, for us, we really need to just look at all the options to see what's out there. It's not a given. I have some concerns about it myself, so.
And there, like this woman said, there's 3 bills, I think. House 3339 and Senate 2387 prohibits any municipal funding for contracts with the purchase or installation of artificial turf. That's a pending.
It hasn't been adopted yet.
Correct, it's in committee. And so, and S624 was filed by a petitioner, and I think that's about the PFAS stuff. So there are like bills concerning, and that's within that time frame. There's no telling whether they're going to pass or not, but it's a concern. And then FIFA is requiring for the World Cup, every surface that they play on has to be real grass, whether it's inside or outside. It's got to be real grass. And Gillette Stadium, they'll be ripping up and putting real grass in there. And that's where everything's going. And like you and I exchanged emails about sub-air systems. You can put a sub-air system in a soccer field and the field for probably $1 million, where artificial turf field's going to be like probably $3 to $4 million. And the maintenance, there's a lot of maintenance that you need on artificial turf also. And it's got to be done by certified people. And the high school field, they didn't maintain it right. And they pretty much lost the warranty on that. I got all the records on it. It's supposed to be during the...
That can be an issue, the maintenance. And thank you for the questions and the statements. We appreciate
the settling in
information.
period is like when you put the field in. I think off the top of my head, it was like 2 months. And it says it shall be groomed weekly. They groomed that field in August, and then they didn't groom it again until November.
Sir, I want to go ahead. We've got a couple of questions from folks that are attending online, so if you don't mind.
My point is that the town doesn't have a good record at maintaining in the
Understood, and our point is we're
problem-
going to look at options, and this is
the
just one of
problem.
those options.
Let me finish. The problem there is there's too many people controlling the fields. There should be like one department that controls all the fields.
Thank you for your statements. Peter Johnson-Stubb, we have a couple of questions from folks online.
We do. We have a question from Peter Hargraves. It's, I'll call it 2 questions. One is sort of a 2-parter, and Peter McConarty did touch on it. The questions are, what is the range of estimated cost for the entire project? And are there funds available from federal, state, or other sources to cover all or part of this cost?
Go try that.
We're early on in the process. We're really in the concept stage right now. So when we're looking at this, when I did my description, I was very careful to say options. There's a lot of options. What we want to do is we want to replace what's on the field now. We don't want to go overboard. We want to replace what's on the field right now. As far as grants out there, I don't know of grants. As far as funding for it, for a cost of it, like I say, we're early on. We're early on in the process of it. But they're athletic fields. They're going to be expensive. The projects are going to be expensive, and being on top of the waste site and having two contractors together, it's going to be expensive. We need to remediate the fields as they are right now. The fields are already in play right now. They're already working. Our goal is to have the 3 fields up and running where they are, and we don't want to change the orientation. They work as they are. We're trying to rebuild them as they are. But as we get more into this concept and design, and we start looking at what the options are. For an example, very easy, the backstops. You can get a chain link backstop, you can get a tension backstop. There's about a $100,000 difference between the two systems. One obviously works a lot better. But once you start getting into that, design, what are we going to use, what are we not going to use? That's when the cost will start becoming clearer.
Thank you. And then the last question is, with contaminated water on the site, is irrigation feasible? So at this point, the site, there is irrigation on the site, on the 3 fields right now. Obviously, it's closed now because the site's closed, but that's town water. It comes off of the town water. It's not a well.
I want to be respectful, mindful of everyone's time. And again, we thank you all for coming out in such rainy weather. Any other questions from the floor? Yes, ma'am.
Lilia Franton, and this has been a very great meeting, and I thank everybody, including you,
Thank you.
for setting this up. It was very important, and I appreciate that it was done, and I appreciate the DPW and Arcadis. I mean, I think all of that has been wonderful for Falmouth, and we should be proud of that. I would like to say, we have some handouts with information that at least the people in the audience here, I'm going to leave them on the back table.
Thank you.
And if anybody would like them, they'll be set up out
Thank you.
there. Thank you.
If you have any other questions after tonight, I'd encourage you, and this is for the folks online as well, Town Manager at Falmouth, send them to the Town Manager's office, townmanager@falmouthma.gov. That's Town Manager, all one word, at falmouthma.gov. If you think of any other questions, again, we're all part of this solution, and we want to solicit input and answer whatever questions, if you couldn't think of any tonight, that you may think of going forward. So use that email to submit those questions. Nothing else online? Okay, if there's no other questions from the floor, again, we appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Drive home safely. Thank you.